Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 3 of the anime series, Astra Lost in Space. And the plot, she thickens in this episode. I was actually somewhat surprised of their laying the cards out on the table that somebody is potentially behind this amongst the crew, and even, beyond that, somebody higher up is potentially behind this, orchestrating it, puppet mastering it. As far as wanting to lead to the deaths of potentially all of these characters, this whole cast of characters, it kind of blew my mind that they put that out on the table and now everyone is aware of it, even potentially a guilty party, because they surmise that for somebody to have tampered with the communications array and everything like that, potentially they would not also then plan on getting out alive themselves. They must be like suicidal or something. And the first name that pops out to me is Yunhua, the quiet girl, as I called her, who almost drowns in this episode just because she didn't put on her helmet, activate the helmet, which may or may not, you could read into it that there is some suicidal, less than thinking about her own well-being kind of thing psychologically going on there. The fact that she is so apologetic, apologizing every other line of dialogue. She's very guilt-ridden. We have a flashback, a pseudo-flashback to what I'm assuming is her mother or a guardian or something like that, whether her birth mother or an adoptive, remains to be seen. But for all intents and purposes, not giving her the most resounding dialogue of support, that kind of thing, slapping her down and telling her to keep invisible, to be unseen, remain unseen if you can't actually, offer anything up to the scenario. And it's funny how that plays into this scenario. So far as we know, we don't know of any speciality that she brings to the table, that she brings to the fore. And so, of course, she's moved up to suspect number one in my mind as far as potentially being the suicidal party, the party that has been contracted to do this, touching base with what I already talked about her seemingly being so guilt-ridden and there's something weighing on her conscience and on her shoulders, and maybe that's what this is. Maybe the plan was, they're looking for an insurance write-off where all of these kids have to be killed, or, they need some tragedy so that some call to war can be enacted or something. Who knows, what it is, how deep down the rabbit hole those machinations go, and to what ends, to what purposes, be this all fulfilled if they all end up, wasting away and expiring, dying in space. But for all intents and purposes, she's the one who is the most strike out to me as being potentially down on her luck, not really giving a crap about her own life. Why didn't she activate her helmet? Why did she leave herself open and sort of, it could be that she's just sort of thoughtless, mindless, about certain things, but she didn't seem the most resounding necessarily with the emergency that erupted with the meteor impact and everything that was drawing the oxygen out of the spaceship. She did for like a split second. It's like, yes, I'm going to, and then boom, she got water in her face and started to drown because of the weightlessness and everything like that, the anti-gravity. And it's interesting how we had almost like a expository info dump toward the first half of the episode, but then the second half was all this action and this impending doom of all their demise crash landing on this planet, which was pulling it in via gravitational pull. And because of the meteor impact and this, that, and the other thing, they had to, hook up a battery pack for all intents and purposes, stuff straight out of Star Trek that Scotty would be on top of, the chief engineer. And but I love that Ares, our resident airhead, is the one who's like, oh, I just happened to find a backup generator. Making me, even though she was the first one we were pseudo introduced to in episode 1, still making me wonder about her too. The whole idea of both of her eyes being slightly different colors, reminding me of Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, and how he had a whole backstory. What's the backstory of Ares? I don't know. Is there one? Who knows? That's going to be half the fun of watching this show, scratching beyond the surface level of all of these characters. We already did with Quittery a little bit, and her little sister to a point. There's that whole aspect of bumping up to June, things revolving around June, with her little sister going to the orphanage and then being very quickly thereafter given a foster sort of family environment in Quitteru's family, and with Ares and her getting involved in this whole thing around the same time, and the idea of illuminating, eliminating, and all that wordplay. Yeah, it's all very intriguing to me. The one thing I will say that I'm kind of backpedaling on a little bit, was my suspicions of Olgar, who I called the resident D-bag before I learned his name, and how closely he resembles Jughead Jones from Riverdale, the TV series and Archie comics. All that kind of stuff. He's very sort of standoffish. He's in his own sort of world. And then, oh no, let's Chicken Little it, because, guns and weapons like that have been sort of abolished for the last 100 years, but he has a gun. And he's pretty proficient with the glue gun, getting the air quotes bird and the gravitational matrix room and everything like that. Saving the day. The fact that he was so gung-ho to help, to assist, makes me dial back on suspicions revolving around him. And the gun thing, I feel like, is a red herring. I feel like he is just a survivalist. He's been used to living his life per his own dialogue on his own for the last 17 years. He's been by himself. He's had to fend for himself. And he knows maybe how in an environment like this, where they're going to, planet after planet hopping, which the environs are going to change drastically, and there's going to be new dangers around every corner. While I'm not somebody who owns a gun and is really in support of owning a gun, I can kind of see it from a pragmatic, point of view, where it's going to be a survival element, something that helps them get food on the table, in the natural environments of these planets, like they did with the Turgons or whatever they were called. They made Turgon steaks, and that kind of thing. So I don't feel suddenly shocked at the revelation that he has a weapon, that's what he was digging around in the storage compartment for, even though it's probably meant to make the viewer, be filled with anxiety and like, oh my goodness, he's got a gun, he's got a weapon, he's got to be the bad guy. Well, no, I don't think so. I don't think so necessarily. Whereas he was my number one top tier, most wanted as far as being the perpetrator behind all of this, at least the localized events of the energy spheres and everything like that, potentially being behind that and sabotaging the communications array. I'm sort of backpedaling on him being, most wanted number one. and that has now shifted whole hog over to Yunhua, where again, I think it's meant to be, she almost drowned, she's an innocent victim, of course it couldn't be her. But then if you apply it that maybe she's suicidal, maybe she doesn't care so much for her own well-being, and she's thoughtless about, protecting herself, because of that, as an extension of that, well then she kind of is like the beacon, the red light beacon flashing in our faces. Maybe she's the one. Maybe she's the one who's perpetrating this locally for a grander purpose. But what is the grander purpose? Why would any group of people or individuals want all of this cast of characters to die? Could it just be, I don't think there's any sort of jealousy or wanting to just get rid of the ball and chains of children and parental or guardian sort of lives or anything like that. I think it must be something much more grandiose, something perhaps militaristic or governmental, bureaucratic, where if these youths die, somebody's going to get the leg up for some clause, for some reasoning, maybe more money to put down on making more stringent borders between planets and space, or something nonsensical like that really devalues human life, at a governmental level, something along those lines. And maybe this school, maybe the higher ups in this school have been approached and are in the pockets of some politician or something like that, some president, where they want to make more stringent laws. They want to make more money off of, putting in these appliances to lock down things, between interplanetary travel and such like that. And what would be the best way to do that? Well, have this grand scale travesty that just happens out of nowhere, where all these innocent lives are wasted. And in a sense, in a sick, twisted sense, if it is Yunhua who has this, lack of self-discipline and self-respect and self-preservation because she is potentially suicidal, she's been crapped on all her life, if we're to gauge anything from that one, admittedly one single flashback scene of a parent or guardian, slamming her down and telling her to keep invisible, stay unseen if you can't actually bring anything to the table. It could very well be that this was a means through which they were trying to pervertedly give her a sense of value. Like, if you accomplish this, if you make sure that, all of you kids don't come out of this alive, you don't survive this, you'll actually be doing good for mommy and daddy. You'll actually be doing good for what we're trying to accomplish with these machinations, whatever perverted, twisted desire is behind potentially, offing all of these kids. So I don't know, still very much up in the air as far as evidence goes and suggestive material goes as to who is behind this and why they might be on a grander scale. But as far as localized, I feel like Yunhua is public enemy number one for me right now, as far as potentially being the saboteur and just being, again, sort of scatterbrained about her own well-being. Well, why? Maybe she doesn't have any self-worth. Maybe she is thinking, along the lines of, I shouldn't be in this world anymore. And now she's been given this purpose that still weighs heavily on her psyche. It still feels wrong, but potentially she's the one who's been gifted this mission statement from somebody outside to say, if you want to actually have some purpose, if you want to feel like you have some worth, accomplish this for us, this dastardly purpose for us. And in your aftermath, in the wake of your death, you'll have made us happy. Kind of, the sick, twisted, perverted, psychotic idea. And again, this is strictly all speculation, just on what we've seen in the first 3 episodes thus far. But everybody else, I don't have any real suspicions about. Kanata, he's going over all of them and like thinking about them. And for the most part, he's kind of like, well, I don't have any reason to suspect them. But, but then there's no follow through as to what the but might amount to, So I'm kind of in the same place. I don't really suspect anybody except for Yunhua at this point. Last episode, I was very much in suspicion of Ulgar and Yunhua. But Ulgar, again, I think his actions in this episode, saving the day, helping to preserve everyone's lives in the manner in which he did, and then having the gun on top of it, it just seems to me that he is a survivalist and a strategist, and, he's had to fend for himself. And this is one more way, a means to an end of accomplishing that, making sure that he'll survive. It could be out of fear that he went and he got that, gun, that he's thinking somebody amongst the crew is potentially trying to kill us, and I need something, some means, some kind of weapon that will, protect myself with. So it's really interesting to get into the psychology of the characters, even characters we don't really know a whole hell of a lot about, in the case of like Yunhua and everything like that. But I feel like with a series like this, they are very smart about doling out incremental bits of information that if you're observant about and you take in tow with everything you know from the previous episodes and what you've seen, what you've observed, you can make sort of, I guess you could say guesstimates about how more or less guilty potentially a character is. And at least for the moment, I have no reason to really suspect anybody but Yunhua. And so I guess we'll see. Because as I say, I think we're meant to feel that Yunhua is only the victim because she almost drowned in this episode. Whereas we're supposed to think Ulgar is the guilty party because he has a gun. But I'm flipping it the other way around. I think that's what they're trying to get us to believe, and they don't want us to read a little bit deeper beyond that surface level to think that he might be a survivalist and she might be suicidal, and that's why she was so oafish about, self-preservation, not activating her helmet and having this, consequence of almost drowning being the effect of that, So again, it remains to be seen, but that's what I have. That's what I'm putting out there on the table. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what your own suspicions are, who you think is public enemy number one. Do you think it's Yunhua, as I suspect, for the reasons I suspect? Whether you agree with me or not, let me know in the comments below. Love it or hate it, anything goes, as long as you are respectable, sharing your own opinion, and are respectful of others as they happen to agree or disagree with you. And if you enjoyed this video and like to consider supporting my channel, please have a look at my PayPal support link, posted both in the description as well as the comments below, which affords you opportunities very much akin to Patreon, where you can set up a reoccurring monthly contribution, a one-time only kind of thing. You can send me a personal message with any contribution you send my way, requesting topics I may discuss in the future, ask for shoutouts, or make recommendations of things I may check out, and would inevitably shout you out down the line if I happen to check out. And anything you saw fit to send my way would be 2 thumbs up for me in securing my longevity on YouTube for the foreseeable future, and just be very much appreciated if you took the time. And so yeah, otherwise, until the next one, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later.